Hello, everyone, and welcome to another TSP Talk. This week, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to be the one quizzing James on a few areas, particularly focused on business operational optimization and how MSPs should be thinking about getting the best out of their existing business, their back-end systems, their operations, so they can focus on what really matters. So, James, great to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I much prefer being a guest to a host, so thank you for taking over this week.
No, my pleasure. I hope I do the stellar job that you always do as well. Um, Look, I want to start out by talking about one of the themes that both of us have been talking about for the last year or so. A lot of the partner events, the lunch and learns, the conversations that we're having day in day out, which is the world of being an MSP is transforming, and it's transforming at a rate of knots that we've never ever seen before. So first off, let's just level set. What are you seeing from a macroeconomic perspective in the world, and then let's just talk about some of those trends and how that's impacting an MSP. And then I want to dive in a little bit about how some of those trends are impacting the day-to-day operations of an MSP.
So I think the big things that are happening that are really affecting the technology businesses through their clients is that most of our client verticals are going through transformation periods as well. So if I look at, say, accounting as a good example, their traditional services are starting to be automated away through AI, better applications online, and they're having to adapt their practices, and that's getting them to look at different technology. We're seeing everywhere is a challenge to hire good talent, and the especially in Australia, New Zealand, and it's happening in Southeast Asia a lot as well. Is the salaries are increasing dramatically, so that squeeze on our ability to retain people at the value rate that we charge out is becoming more difficult. And then inflation around our cost of insurance, our cost of utilities, leasing, list goes on.
Yeah.
That's all increasing as well. So our margins are getting squeezed at multiple directions, and we're having to adapt to where our clients are, and we're having to transform our businesses as well as our traditional services are being commoditized as an MSP or an SI.
Mm. And you're right. There's this concept of margins getting squeezed, but I would say there's another layer which I'm really seeing is that MSPs have built tech stacks built on delivering particular solutions to market. And what's happening is, Microsoft has done an incredible job at building out an incredible modern workplace solution and an amazing, completely integrated stack. And what's happening is they're actually, eating the lunch of a lot of these other vendors. They're actually putting, erasing the requirement to have necessarily all of the security stack that partners have previously made margin and great margin on as well. So there's that's the number of solutions that a partner can go out and successfully sell. Their value proposition is diminishing as Microsoft take a bigger footstep into the market as well, which really means that the requirements of the MSP is changing as well. They don't need to maybe monitor and manage the type of solutions that they once did. New solutions are coming in at a rate of knots. And the other impact is that with the ease of the likes of Microsoft 365 today, it doesn't have the same support requirements that it once did.
It's very much us shifting away from that traditional end user support and infrastructure focus, that what our clients really need from us is an application and process focus. And that's where we're going to see a lot of friction over the next couple of years, as we're having to change our business model and change our skills, because very few people in our organization have those skills and that sort of natural affinity to go and do that stuff. So we're definitely going to have to look at that change, and then this is where it becomes really important to get our foundations right in our current business model, so that we're profitable, we're sustainable, so that as we need to direct our attention away to new business units, new offerings, etc., our core business doesn't fall away while we're trying to do that. And I'm seeing a lot right now of where clients are starting to ask for these sort of things that we're talking about. Like I'll use Power Automate as a good example, that clients are asking our partners to do things in Power Automate, whether that's directly by coming to them and going, we want to do stuff in Power Automate. How can you help? Indirectly through asking for licenses and just procuring them, or or very subtly around they're asking questions, but they're not knowing how to articulate it. And that's where our partners aren't really picking up on this stuff, because they're stuck deep down in that day-to-day business of our traditional MSP or SI. We're either running around trying to support and manage our infrastructure, or we're running around trying to sell the next project. We're not being able to come out because our business operations aren't mature enough to run a sustainable business.
And it talks exactly to what you just said, is the requirements. I would say that previously it's been a bit of a push for the channel to go up market and try to talk about business process optimization and applications, etc. But I'm really seeing that it's becoming a pull, and the end user is more tech savvy. They've got more awareness, and they're going, holy moly, my business is changing at a rate of knots. I need to remain competitive in my market, whether I'm an accountant or a finance or a medical organization. And I recognize that my house is a mess in terms of the amount of systems that I've got set up and that I'm managing. So it very much is, the conversation is, how can I optimize my organization's business processes? Have I got the right applications that allow my workforce to work as effectively as possible? So completely agree there.
And it's a bit, I liken this to the cloud revolution a while ago. You look at the adoption of Office 365 when it came out, and that trend, it came out 2011, 2012. The industry didn't really adopt it to 2016 when that was sort of forced on it. And it's the same, we're going through that same sort of cycle. And I think what's important to note in this is it's a bigger pull because of those macro environments, whereas Office 365 was just because we couldn't sell SBS Server anymore. Now it's driven by those macro things that we're talking about. And I'm already seeing anecdotally that clients are actually churning from their immature MSPs onto the more mature MSPs because their current providers aren't having these conversations, but people like their insurance broker, their lawyer, their accountant, their other business advisors are telling them they need to do these things. They know the problems, their business problems. They're keeping the C-suite and the owners up at night because that's their core business. And what's interesting is that it's not just my anecdotal evidence, but like we spoke with Brad from Microsoft the other week, and they're seeing more partner of record churn from partner to partner than has ever existed in the entirety of the lifespan of Office 365. So it's not ethereal thing that we're talking about. Like you said, it's not just being pushed. It's not a vendor agenda being pushed. It's actually a legitimate thing that's happening.
Well, and just to add on to what he says they're not just churning and staying the same. They're churning and they're increasing their SKU. They're going from basic to standard to premium to E3. And what that talks to is the new providers that are coming through are able to articulate that value proposition of the additional capability, the security required, and customers are willing to pay for that. It's just a lot of the traditional MSPs aren't having that conversation. I want to take a little bit of a step back because what we're hearing here and what we're seeing is that there's this massive shift at the end customer level. And I think that's what we always need to focus on, is what is the requirements of the end customer. Now, we've got we're at this point in time where those that are going to be the first movers and build capability that's going to talk to application optimization, business process optimization, and to be successful in building a high margin offering. But when we come back to the traditional business and the economics of how MSPs drive profit, it's the simple equation is profit equals revenue minus your costs. In simple terms, there's multiple variations, but revenue minus your cost of goods sold. So the margin erosion is really saying that the revenue that we're getting in and the price point is actually coming down due to commoditization, but our cost structure is going up, which means that our margin is being eroded. So I think there's a couple of conversations that we can have. One is we need to shine the light and say, if you haven't already started having business conversations with your customers around how can you help them to achieve your customers, why not? Because if you're not, someone else is. But if you would like to and you just don't have the mind share to do that, why not as well? And I think that we've had a lot of conversations recently with partners, and they're pulling their hair out if they've got any left, and going, my business is chaotic. I've got all these systems, this data, this shadow IT, and each time I hear one of these terms, all I think is, your profit is getting eroded by a cost, and that cost is either tech hard costs or it's labor. So talk to me a little bit about the impact of these macro trends on what that is having on the operations, both like hard costs and soft costs for an MSP.
Well, if I go in a very practical way and talk about a bit of history, if most of us as an MSP actually true MSPs, and when I say that, it's really that the true MSP model is based on proactivity, managing ROI, and leveraging automation to make the technology better and have more profitable agreements. Most of us aren't at that maturity level. The majority of us are still on the maturity level that we fixed price our support and management. There's no proactiveness. There's no problem management. There's no automation. We're just very stuck on that. We need to throw bodies at it, and we need to just answer the phone quickly because we just need to resolve the tickets coming through. And what makes that difficult for people to change is all of a sudden over the last 3 years, our wages have gone up huge amounts. Like we're at like $80,000-$90,000 on average for level 1 tech in Sydney, as an example, where maybe even 5 years ago, that same resource that doesn't know a whole lot would be on 40K. And because we've sold our practices the way that we have in the past around, well, we'll just fix price it and we'll just take care of everything for you. That's been our mentality for the past decade. So when we created these packages in the past, most people looked at how much labor are we spending per month on average for our clients. I will chuck 20-30% on it. And most of those legacy arrangements are still with most MSPs that I come across. And what's happened is that conventional wisdom, because a lot of us aren't really sales orientated, have been, well, bundle everything, and let's chuck all our anti-spam, our antivirus in the past. We'll just bundle that in our labor costs. So we haven't used the right pricing methodology to create that initial package, and it's coming back to bite us because as we're struggling to create more value and sell that value to our clients because we never really understood what we were doing in the first place. As we're requiring and cybersecurity stepped up, we're having to throw more tools into our packages, which automatically drags down the cost, the profit. It's driving up the costs, let alone all the price rises from those tools. And for many people, this is why they're on legacy solutions. Like email security is a really good example of this. A lot of people are still on really old school spam that aren't good enough for modern email security. And they're trapped because they might be paying $1 a license, and then all of a sudden the modern solutions maybe $3-4. It's not a lot, but if you're already haven't priced it right and it's eating into your margin, you get stuck in this cycle. So for me, what's really important at the moment is really understanding what your revenue is, what are your costs, and being able to highlight that as a work on area. And I'll throw out a best practice here. When we're talking overall business, we should be generating 50% gross profit minimum in a technology business. And that means basically if I'm generating $1 million of revenue, I've got my product COGS, my cloud subscription COGS, my hard costs to deliver the solutions, and then my technical labor and administrative costs. That should be 50%. So if you're not there, you need to be able to see why and have that level of granularity.
And on that note as well, and I want to get into talking about some of the tools that can help partners to begin to streamline their operations and begin to free up their time to focus their mind on growing the business. But one of the challenges most partners I speak to have is they don't truly know how profitable their customers are. They think that on the surface, oh, this is a great contract. It's $10,000 a month, and my my hard costs or my COGS are, it's operating at 50%. But by the time you take into account all of the labor, the time, the administration, they may think it's 50% and they're operating at 30% net profit, but their margin's been completely eroded, but they don't know that because they don't have visibility. So the conversation around having really good quality agreements or contracts in your PSA system, I think, is critical. And then potentially even layering on additional tools that can just provide dashboards and alerts that, as soon as a partner or a customer falls below a particular threshold, you get notified. But just having that data and having that as one of the anchors that you as a business owner lean on, I think is really important as well.
It really is, and I think there's a few components to this. You need your PSA and your chart of accounts set up well, and there's best practice structures to do that, and that can take some time. But then, like what you mentioned with tools, before I dive into sort of the tools, if you really want to do this, it's very easy to do it in spreadsheets. But if we're super busy running around from one thing to the other, and you're not quite comfortable in financial acumen, it's a very big and scary thing to do that. And that's often where the tools come into play. So if I use like MSP CFO as an example, they're a bit of a leader in this stuff. They've got all these pre-canned reports already built out. You just need to make sure your PSA data is set up correctly, and it'll spit out all this different information around your agreement profitability, your technical staff's productivity and utilization rates. It's got a whole lot of different ratios to help you make decisions and pull levers. And many people see a tool as a silver bullet, and the reason why I sort of took that journey is you need good data in your PSA, and often even just engaging in something like MSP CFO, it can show you how much quality your data has, and then give you opportunity to work on it. So you don't need to have it perfect before you dive in, and having all the pre-canned reports allows you not to have to try and reinvent the wheel and come up with all these different kinds of metrics, because this is a well-trodden path. That's MSP industry's been around for at least 20 odd years. Like there's numbers and there's best practices to follow on this. So, but you don't just treat it as chuck the tool in and also solve all your problems. But you need to learn, and you need to actually execute off the back of it as well. So if you open it up and go, oh, my agreement profitability isn't as good as I think it is, that's a great shining light. But then if you don't do anything about it, all you've done is you're not doing the right thing.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think that's a really good pivot into talking about some of the problems that we're seeing in a lot of the MSPs that we talk to today, and then I want to then dive into what are some of the solutions that we can begin to present to help address and alleviate some of the pain associated with those problems, which are just growing at a rate of knots due to those macro challenges that we talked about at the beginning. So profit, absolutely critical. Cash flow, critical. If we don't have money coming in and profitable money coming in, we're going to be out of business pretty soon. So let's just say that we've implemented a solution. So we can talk a little bit about MSP CFO. We've identified that our gross profits okay, but our net profit, below the line costs, are actually higher. The costs are higher than we thought. So what are some of the reasons that you're seeing that it's almost sticker shock? Partners, they look and go, wow, I didn't realize that I'm actually operating at a 6% profitability in this area. What are some of the reasons and inefficiencies that you're seeing in MSPs that are causing them to have a much lower net income than they thought they were going to?
A lot. There's multiple ones. The first one I come to is automation around billing, and go back to the legacy stuff around how we bundled everything. We tried to hide everything. So in hiding everything from the client, we used to just chuck one item on the agreement, and that was it. Where we've got all these subscriptions, and I've seen partners that have like 40 subscriptions that they're selling to their client. Without that granularity and without that automation, they're losing thousands of dollars every month of not billing that correctly. So that's one of the main reasons. The second is the lack of visibility. Again, so they don't know where the problems are. They don't have the PSA set up correctly. They don't have financial visibility. The addition to that then is our sales. Often we're very inefficient through our sales, and that's mainly because we what's the right way to say it? Our salespeople are fickle people. You're a salesperson, so I can pick on you. You're not very detail orientated. If technology is not working quite well for you, you'll throw your hands up and go, "This is too hard. I just want to go talk to people," and legitimately so. But I'm a bit old school. I had to do this all by hand. And one of the things that we're really bad at with is our inventory management and using that to do like routine sales. Like an example I always use is just a really simple one. Imagine you've got 600 desktops that you're managing, and you've got a 5-year life cycle. That means you should be selling 120 desktops each and every year to keep them under manufacturer's warranty. That means you need to do 10 a month. If you're making, say, $700 margin on that sale with the hardware and then the labor to roll that out, there's $7,000 a month that you could do. But because we're so inefficient at managing that flow, and we don't often have enough visibility of that inventory data, very few MSPs actually do that. And that not only reduces the opportunity for your professional services labor, it also increases the cost on your managed services because you've got an aging fleet that have more problems. If you have a new fleet, there's a lot less problems. Your margins and your agreement profitability is a lot higher. So I wouldn't downplay the inventory management side. And then it's things like visibility from that inventory side is visibility into what assets and what configurations your clients have. How often I've heard it time and time again where an MSP goes to their client and they have to ask the client what they've got again, but they've been a client for like 5 or 6 years, and this is getting more and more difficult because as we're getting a lot more churn with our employees, that sort of institutional knowledge that we might have had for a long time, where we like most of our team had been there for 5 to 10 years, knew the clients inside and out. That cycle is happening a lot faster. So we can't rely on institutional knowledge. And because we don't have that, that's what creates even more inefficiencies in our service delivery, because all of a sudden we've got to spend like half an hour to find what they're talking about because we don't have the documentation. People are making changes on things that we don't even necessarily know about, which can cause technical issues. But it's also a cybersecurity risk as we move into the future as well.
And it's an accelerated sort of growth of assets that the end customers got. And there's work from home, and there's new applications and logins and credentials and new users being onboarded and offboarded. And if none of that is centralized, come back to that aspect of your low-cost resources, 70 grand, 80 grand a year. That's a really expensive administration activity that you're sitting there. So let's talk solutions. So this is a problem, and it's a growing problem, and it's growing from both top-down complexity, amount of assets, and then also bottom-up is the cost to actually administer that. How should MSPs be thinking about that, and what are the tools that they can consider implementing that are going to drive efficiencies here?
So I use the term inventory management. We also use the term asset management, and I just want to start there because it all starts there, and it's not just me that says that. Like I'll use from a cybersecurity perspective, the first 2 controls of the CIS framework are all about understanding the inventory of what you've got for multiple reasons, mainly in cybersecurity, so you know what risk you're mitigating against, and then when something does happen, how do you recover against it? But in terms of normal MSP operations, it's very much billing. You need to know we're charging by user or charging by seat. What's our inventory to manage that by? It's that information about configurations to make sure we're maintaining standards, not just for cybersecurity, but for the policy for those companies. And then, like you said, as more shadow IT comes into it, we need to know what systems they're doing and using, So not only can we manage their identity and ideally use SSO and make it a better experience and integrations across those solutions for them, it's also security. Where are they holding their data and PII? If we don't know about this and we aren't talking about that with our clients,
Yeah.
we're in the dark. And so this is where inventory management and configuration management database is so important in this modern age. And the solution, there's not many solutions out there that are built for MSPs. They're mainly enterprise and for one single sort of environment. So this is where like LionGuard comes into it. And the advantage of this is it's built for MSPs. It's multi-tenancy, which is the important part, and it's centralized management, like you said. And I hate the term single pane of glass because there's like 50 single pane of glasses that we're all working with. But it actually integrates into the PSA, RMM, IT glue, let alone everything else. So when you're doing your sort of documentation management, all of a sudden that sort of LionGuard that can do all this sort of asset and configuration assembly of the data can then put it somewhere that you use normally. And that's where the efficiencies can start, because all of a sudden you've got your list of assets, you know what the configurations are, it's in your central spot. And I'll use Hoodoo or IT Glue as an example of that. Well, our techs are already using that to look at passwords and everything else. Now all of a sudden they've got more information in front of them, but then they can start utilizing a lot less time. And then what's important from this is then the change detection, because cybersecurity, the risks on insurance, we need an audible way to show that we made a firewall configuration change, as an example. Well, this sort of solution will then actually alert us. I've sat through it as managing a service department where one of my cowboy techs on a Friday afternoon made a change in a firewall. The clients come back on Monday ringing up and nothing's working, and the poor tech on the phone didn't know the change had happened. Where if we had this sort of alert, well, we would have known already and would have been able to start our investigations a lot faster, and going back to that administration time for resources, that's our highest cost.
So where does LionGuard, does LionGuard plug in and solve a lot of those challenges you just talked about?
Yeah, it does, because what it does is it's got network detectors and desktop agents, and it gathers a whole lot of all the data from the configuration. So if you use a firewall as an example, you'll start getting details around like the firmware, what ports are open, blah, 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 blah. I won't go into all the technical details. And it then has an alerting engine to go, well, this port just got opened, or in 365, this global admin just got created. And so you can start getting a lot more visibility of what's going on in the environments. And this is very foreign to us because it's never been cost effective for an MSP to do that. It's always been an enterprise thing to have this level of alerting and data at our fingertips. So it's a bit of a mindset shift.
Any idea on how much time is spent on all of those sort of activities for your average tech or average MSP?
So I've got two answers for this. If you don't do it, you're not spending any time on it. And that's where most of us are at. And to me, it's a danger with the risks associated, especially as we're selling a lot more cybersecurity packages and we're taking on the cyber risk. Well, we need to know this stuff. So if we're not doing it, it's a cost, and we need to price it and monetize it in the right way. The ones that have been doing this manually very well, depending on your size and scale, this could be like hundreds of hours a month, legitimately. Like if you're doing configuration management properly and after each sale, you're creating a new configuration, that adds up quickly. If you're doing all this change control detection and things like that and quality assurance, it's exponential depending on your volume and scale. But your average MSP, if you're doing this kind of stuff right, I'd expect it's probably 20, 30 hours a month with this kind of activity.
If you don't have a solution to solve for it. And I'm guessing as you're talking that particularly with the insurance requirements that are coming in, there's going to be tick boxes that a lot of this stuff should be done in order for you to actually get your insurance in the first place. So, your catch-22, right?
Yeah.
And then the other piece, I come back to my basic economics of profit equals revenue minus your cogs. If you need to scale and need to grow, and you're spending your low-level resources on this, which are still costing you 80 grand a year to hire, then one, that's expensive. But two, if you need to go hire another one as you're looking to scale and you're a small MSP, that additional $80,000 a year is going to hit your cash flow. It's going to put you in a really difficult position. So finding a tool such as Line Guide is actually going to, one, give you more scalability. Two, is going to help you align with your compliance and your insurance requirements. And three, is going to allow you to deliver more profitable services as well.
And that's the important part that a lot of our partners are running into, is that with margin squeeze, and it's really hard to get good staff as well. Let's not downplay that. So that recruitment is something that most people are trying to avoid.
Yeah.
And this is where, when I start looking and go back to a bit of what I said before around, we're not very proactive. We're still focused on just dealing with tickets as fast as possible. What's actually more important is stopping the tickets getting created in the first place. And I already sort of gave one around asset management. If we're replacing the assets, we reduce the tickets naturally. But there's things there that around automation that we could be doing, and to reduce the need for staff, and elevate them. So if we've got an 80 grand resource like we're talking about, if they're only doing low level, basically administration work, it's not super technical, it's just more technical than the average admin task. That's not very valuable. And this is where, compared to in the past where we were sold the dream by certain RMMs that we could manage like 500 to 1,000 endpoints per tech, we all know how false that was. There's actually technology that's coming out that's helping with that. And before I talk a bit more about that, well, let's just highlight some of the issues that we can solve even without paying anything. One example is password resets. How many of us are spending so much time just entering a phone and resetting a password for M365? If you actually have the right licensing and you set it up correctly, you can use self-service password reset. All of a sudden, all of that work's gone. You'll get the occasional that still need help, but that's just reduced your cost for a small implementation. And all of a sudden, the client has a better experience. So that's win-win. There's things like, we all still suffer from Outlook problems, but people still haven't got onto driving people to use the portal online, or even using something like a PWA. That can reduce our work. But then we start getting to things that we can't just necessarily do for free, and whether that's actually buying a tool to do it, or investing the amount of time to script up the things properly. And that's things like new user creation and user removals. In the past, we needed to hold the keys of the castle. It was all difficult because we all did it on servers. Now it's all in M365. It's fairly standard and it's fairly structured, but we still don't do it very well because we haven't looked at it in a process-driven way, and then we're not utilizing something to automate it, let alone take it to the next step and then enable someone to self-service it. And this is where that opportunity for automation and optimization really starts kicking off, because if you can do that, and let's say you buy a tool, and we'll talk about that in a minute. If you buy a tool, I see a lot of people fail at this because they don't know what they're trying to achieve in the first place. That you either need to be using it as a way to reduce the work and elevate your staff to do higher levels of billing. You either need to do it and then consolidate your staff down, or you need to use it to grow and add more clients and mitigate that cost of being able to scale up. And if you don't do that and you buy a tool, all you're doing is automating some stuff faster under a fixed price agreement, and then you've still got all the costs. In fact, you've added to more costs. So if you've already got poor margins, you've just squeezed it even more. So I just wanted to highlight that before we talk a bit more about it.
Mm. No, that's a good point, and it dovetails quite nicely into, I guess, the concept of automation. And just to preface this conversation, one of the things that we talked about, and you've been talking about on stage quite a bit, is 70% of tickets that come to a service desk at an MSP are level 1 tickets today. And again, I just go back to that expensive resource sitting there doing password resets or some really basic requests. And it's driving profitability out of your business, because it's at one point it's not worth spending all of that money to have someone do really simple tasks. And this is where we're also seeing this introduction of new technologies that are coming into the MSP space around AI, automation, and putting MSPs in a position that they can begin to automate a lot of those activities. Some of these exist at the end user level, but the risk to an MSP is that if they price themselves out of the market, their customers are going to go elsewhere for a much cheaper price solution for just doing some basic products. So it's a risk. It's a risk of losing business, but it's also a risk that if you're not beginning to automate some of this stuff, you're not spending your mind share focused on where is my business going to be in 3 years. So just talk to me a little bit more about what are those common requests coming in, and I want to probably introduce Roost at this point as well, which is a new solution that we've recently launched here in Australia on the Paxay line card, which has gained a lot of traction. But talk to me about some of the typical challenges or help desk questions that are coming in, and then how are they being solved with some of this new cutting edge technology?
Yep. So we've touched on password resets. We've touched on some user management, which we'll dive into with Roost. There's things, and Outlook. There's things like printer management that we haven't gotten rid of, and there's still very simple desktop issues around. I shouldn't say issues. Service requests about getting access to certain applications. So when we
Probably,
sorry,
adding a new user, getting
yep.
a new user's Microsoft credentials, password set up, all of that sort of stuff is probably a common request.
100%. And when I look at the average MSP, there's a few opportunities here to use something like Roosts. And what I want to talk about first is when we use the term automation, and you mentioned AI, there's a few different methods that tools use. So there's AI driven things that are using machine logic to make decisions and action things. And then there's robotic process automation, and Roost is robotic process automation. So it's not AI, it's not making decisions for you. It's an engine and a platform for you to design processes for the machine to automate. It's the same as Power Automate, but Roost is built for the MSP. So I'm going to use the example of a new user creation. There's two opportunities here with robotic process automation, RPA. Firstly is the time it takes for people to do it. And because when we're creating new users now, they've got so much complexity around what applications they're using, what security groups they need to be in, what things they need to get access to. It takes a long time. I see on the average MSP, a new user probably takes about an hour worth at least of backwards and forwards with the client to get all this done. And then on the back of that, how many of you have seen when your team does this, the client ringing back because they didn't get what they expected, it wasn't set up the same way as the previous user, and that inconsistencies start creeping in, so we create more and more rework. So this is where robotic process automation comes in. So if you look at a new user creation, like you mentioned, you've got to provision a license. You've got to understand what requirements they have around security groups, access to what files, blah, 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 and what applications. This is where you can map that out in a process, and then use the tool, use Roost to then go and provision the license from Paxay, go initiate the creation in the 365 tenancy and use the and take up that license, go push out access to XYZ application, make sure they're in XYZ security group, etc., etc., etc. Then all of a sudden, there's no work to do. You've just gotten rid of potentially that hour, but also because you've mapped it out, there's no rework. And then if you add on to it a self-center sort of form-based thing in front of it, you can just get your client to fill out what they need and then automate it so you don't even need to be told about it, and it just happens. So no longer do you have those client complaints that we're not responding fast enough to these requests. All of a sudden, they're empowered to do their own thing. And that cost saving, when it's run out properly, you just run your ticket numbers, huge. And then you start adding in that removal. So not only do you have the ability to then create that consistency to remove a user, it's a very important these days because of the cybersecurity risk. We don't want zombie accounts, but also being able to remove the license when necessary, so we stop getting billed. So we don't have to rely on the techs or anyone to go in and manually admin that sort of provisioning and reverse engineer everything. So just in that one thing, if you think about your clients and that churn of employees, going back to the macro level, how many new users and removals are you doing each and every day? Even the small guys, that's predominantly their help desk at the moment.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And yeah, I'm always thinking about, what's next? What's the next big thing coming in RPA and AI? I think they're incredible tools for us to be looking at optimizing our own internal processes. But these are great solutions and concepts to become familiar with, to talk to clients about as well. And all of a sudden, if that's of interest to you, you can carve out that USP and go and deliver that as consultancy or professional services for your client as well. But you're absolutely right. Like, whether we like it or not, these technologies coming in, and they're coming in so quickly, are going to transform the way in which businesses are run. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth, like, any typical MSP looking at how they can automate, how they can streamline, how they can centralize. And again, it's one way I look at it is, it's looking back, how can I reduce manual labor, manual intervention, automate, drive profitability today up, but also, one is it's more profitable per solution, per customer, but on the other hand, it's that time that you get back. And I think that it's wise for customers to consider having some sort of allocation of time on a monthly basis to focus on R&D and to focus on where do we want our business to be in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And you can't do that if you're chasing your tail. So it's a double-edged sword, and it's a double win if you are able to implement these sort of solutions and get true visibility into your organization.
And I'd add on top of this, it is a triple win, because if you go through this process, leveraging tools to uncover data, create more visibility to make data-driven decisions, you start stepping up the chain to your governing, not reacting, and then you're automating things to reduce your time. As you go through that process and that learning journey for your own business, and you are talking to your clients, you can talk with authority of how this works, and you will learn the process of change management, and you'll learn the process of mapping out processes, all of that kind of stuff. And then you can monetize to deliver the solutions for your clients. So it's a very valuable thing, but like you said, you need to dedicate the right time to work on the business, not reactively in it.
Plan it, schedule it, be calculated. Yeah, absolutely. So that was awesome. I think we've agreed that there's some macro trends that are massively impacting the globe. They're massively impacting the way in which MSPs operate. And that in turn is absolutely meaning that MSPs are going to have to do things differently. And they're going to have to start doing things differently really quickly if they want to remain competitive within their businesses. So we talked about three main problems around lack of visibility and insights into profitability. We talked about configuration and password management challenges of having access to all of the assets on a particular client site. And we talked about automation and the requirement for staying up with the Joneses with regards to service delivery and cost effectiveness, and introducing automation and RPA where it makes sense in your business. And for those that are interested, go and have a look at companies like, I would say MSP CFO is a great layer-on solution if you've got Autotask and ConnectWise. Is that right? You have to have one of those PSAs.
Yep.
So that's where they're sitting today. Have a look on their website. Have a look in the Paxade portal. Have the chat with you can about that. Then we've got LionGuard, which just sounds like an absolute no-brainer for any organization to be looking at that. And I think I don't know the pricing, but from what I know, it's pretty cost effective, particularly when you compare what a low-level resource costs in Australia today. And then Roost, that's one which we just brought to market recently, and have had a chat with some of the channel managers already, and they said that's definitely getting traction. So we got products, but I also just want to circle back to what you mentioned earlier. It's not just about buying a product or a solution. It's about ensuring that the business operations have been implemented effectively. And I want to give a shout out to you and your team of coaches, because that's the sort of activity that they're doing, is they're working with partners to put a magnifying glass on different areas of your business, identify inefficiencies, and work on strategic plans to help them take their business to the next level as well. So if there's any partners that are interested in talking tech, have a chat with us. If there's any partners that are interested in talking with one of our coaches that are just absolutely passionate about helping partners grow their business and do that effectively, then encourage you to have a chat with James, and I'm sure he'll give you as much time as he's got available to chat about what we can do. But any final thoughts or comments before we close out, James?
I think I'd leave with this: is there is a lot to do, and we covered just a bit in our time talking, and there's a lot of disruption going on. You only need to do one thing at a time, though. Don't try and bite everything off. Just pick one thing that's really going to move your business forward and make a difference, and focus on that. Get that done, and then choose the next thing, and then choose the next thing, and choose the next thing. Don't get caught up in the tools and what's going on in the industry. You need to know it, but you need to stay focused on your business and what you need to achieve. So a really simple thing that we're talking a lot about now, if you haven't risen your prices in like 5 years, maybe it's time to do it. Even without buying anything, without doing anything differently, just raise your prices and you're going to be in a better position. That's one simple step you can do. And then focus on whatever else is important, but understand your core challenges, your core objectives, and then select the one that's the right thing. Don't react to all the small things that are happening day to day, because you'll just chase symptoms, not actually solve the real problems.
But take action. Take action, and take action sooner rather than later, and just take that one small thing and do it, and you'll be in a better position. I get concerned and worried at the speed at which we're moving. If partners aren't moving quickly and looking at optimization and building a new USP, then they're going to get left behind, and I definitely don't want that. So awesome. That was a fantastic session, James. Appreciate your time as always, and hope everyone enjoyed the content, and look forward to chatting with you soon.
Thanks for having me, Bergs.
Cheers. Take care.